Okay. The third source that I've examined for were variation is 12 letters from Hugh Macaulay, from whose surname you would certainly expect to be from Ireland or maybe a descendant of an Irish immigrant. He was a white plantation overseer, an absentee overseer, writing to the owner of the plantation from the PD River in South Carolina between 1814 and 1816. There are 12 letters that I've been able to find and transcribe. In table 3 and number 8 of the handout, we see that was is categorical throughout the paradigm here. He never uses were whatsoever. It's not there with the in the third person plural to distinguish nouns and pronouns, and it can't be found anywhere else. So, for instance, in the example sentences in number 9, we have 9C, a second person singular. If you had asked me when you was here, was occur with pronouns as well as nouns throughout the paradigm. So with Macaulay, we see complete leveling. And this actually is the pattern that we know is the one that spread throughout most of the South. So far as I've been able to determine, the first pattern that we looked at, dolphins with the subject type constraint in the plural, did not survive the founding generation of immigrants. The second pattern, Catherine McCormick Smith with were in the singular, actually survived in a good part of the eastern Carolinas, and no doubt was the input to the recently elaborated grammaticalization that Walt Wortham and his colleagues have found in the eastern part of North Carolina, with was in the affirmative and weren't in the negative throughout the paradigm, singular and plural. So these documents help us work toward populating the South Carolina linguistic landscape of the 18th and early 19th century. They don't provide a linguistic geography per se, but they certainly move us in that direction. They suggest that the northern present tense rule in the past tense, for example, disappeared after its founding generation. Now, let me turn to a very different type of text in the few minutes that I have left here. In this case, I want to look at published textbooks in the South from the early 1860s. War has many orphans. Among the orphans that war produces that we don't usually think about are the textbooks of school children. The war in commencing in 1861 with a blockade by federal troops of southern ports meant that textbooks could no longer be brought in from the major producers in Massachusetts and elsewhere in the north. So in order to continue education, the South had to produce its own textbooks. And it did so. There were a variety of motivations in this effort. Certainly there was the necessity born from the Yankee blockade that I referred to. The effort to produce Southern or Confederate textbooks also was in part self-promotion. Many of the authors who produced these books were teachers in academies and they had undoubtedly been wanting to get their own books adopted in the lucrative textbook adoption market of the day, and the blockade gave them the opportunity finally to do this. The titles for these books suggest that they were indeed appealing to a Southern audience. Titles such as The Dixie Primer, The Southern Reader, The New Texas Primary Reader, The Confederate States Speller and Reader. These titles were designed to appeal to Southern sentiments, even if the books themselves were otherwise indistinguishable from the ones used before the war, produced in the North. Sometimes they claimed superiority. For instance, there's one title, The Southern Edition of the Elementary Spelling Book, being an improvement on the American Spelling Book by Noah Webster. This was obviously designed to try to show that the Northern authors were innately inferior and Southern writers could improve on them. So as I say, other than what appears on the title page, sometimes there's little, if anything, to indicate that these are not just generic textbooks, otherwise indistinguishable from their Northern counterparts used before the war. These were published throughout the Confederacy. They were published in Mobile, Raleigh, Macon, Charleston, Augusta, Richmond, Greensboro, Houston, Austin, Nashville, and no doubt elsewhere. But beyond necessity and opportunism, there was a third purpose, and this was propaganda. For a generation, Southerners had rankled in using textbooks generated from the North. It wasn't just that Northerners were capitalizing on the textbook market. It's that Southerners sensed an abolitionist conspiracy behind the production of many of these books. They never featured Southern examples. They never mentioned Southern names. They had a bias that Southerners were eager to do away with once they have the opportunity to do so. And I've given you in number 9 on the handout a quote from one of the prefaces of the book to justify the author's production. The Southerners in their previous history have been content to have their books furnished them by the North. This not only discouraged Southern authorship and cramped genius, but it allowed the North the chief means of shaping national bias, the press. But now that the Southern people have separated from the North and established an independent nationality, she will, of course, hail with pleasure every industrious effort of her own sons to free her from abolition dependencies. This same author went on to commend his books to parents and teachers by saying that it was written by a Southerner, published and edited in the South. It was not tainted in any way by Northern tendencies, in other words. Another claimed superiority because it adopted the practice of using Confederate rather than foreign names in the examples. But beyond necessity, opportunism, and propaganda, a fourth purpose was to identify for correction pronunciations found among Southern school children. And altogether, I've examined 51 primary level school books published in the Confederate States between 1861 and 1865. These are mostly readers, but because reading was taught as an oral activity, many feature rules for proper pronunciation or orthography.